Good afternoon, I'm Madonna from New Leaf Natural Therapies and this is Sanu, and we're going to demonstrate a little bit of LEAP, which is a process that integrates the left and right sides of the brain. So basically LEAP was developed about 30 years ago by Dr. Charles Krebs, and one of the things that he found is if we can't hold our two arms out wide when we're thinking about something stressful, it's a sign of a lack of communication of left and right sides of the brain. So what we're going to do is ask if the two sides of the brain are communicating. Hold out, and there's a little bit of a disconnect, which means it unlocks. Now, one of the things about kinesiology is an unlock does not mean a bad thing. It simply means that there's less than 50% function somewhere, and what we do is diffuse some emotional points that helps to pick up the energy. Obviously, there's always a little bit of stress whenever we're checking someone's brain, so it's often not a surprise when something unlocks. And hold. Beautiful. Now that's locking. So that is a part of the brain called the corpus callosum. It's about 1 to 1.3 centimeters wide, and it connects the logical and the creative sides of the brain. One of the main things that disconnects the corpus callosum, however, are trust and trust issues. So when someone hasn't had a lot of kinesiology, or if something bad has happened that day, that has allowed them to challenge their trust of the world around them. Hold. Trust can unlock those two sides of the brain. So with kinesiology, we're just not finding imbalances, we're then actually treating those imbalances. So this little area down through here, there's 5 acupuncture points which I check constantly, and they access a part of the brain called the amygdala. When we are under stress, our brain has got 1/500th of a second to respond logically, creatively, clearly to stress. And if it doesn't do that, it whips into the amygdala, which is where our fight and flight, our pain and punishment, us wanting to run away, some core depression sort of areas, these are the little areas that live in the amygdala. So if it unlocks from left and right sides of the brain, we diffuse the amygdala and then recheck. Trust and trust issues. And hold. Beautiful. Now the next area I'm going to check is called the frontal cortex. It's the anterior commissure. So this little area, hold, that's doing pretty well. The main thing that does, that's our frontal cortex. It's the area that problem solves. It's up and running. Now one of the main things that shuts it down is feeling sad or despondent or bummed out, that sort of feeling. And hold. No, that's pretty good. Fantastic. The next little area I want to show you is the hippocampus. There's so much research going on about the hippocampus these days because it's about memory. So because of everything going on with Alzheimer's and dementia, this is a huge part of the brain for us to check. So, and the combination of acupuncture points are like the coordinates that I need to use to get into these parts of the brain. So this one, hold out. Perfect. So a lock means there's more than 50% energy going to an area. So the hippocampus, one of the main things that shuts it down is fear of failure. And hold. Okay, so this little brain does not like wanting to struggle with fear of failure. And it's, funnily enough, no surprise in the amygdala, it's fear, threat, danger that gets activated. And if we have a fear of failure, you can imagine at some time in a person's past, people were in trouble for being wrong, or felt silly for being wrong, or were told they were stupid for being wrong. So we have all of these subconscious patternings going on in the background that want us to feel right, because when we feel right, we feel happy, we feel safe, we feel secure. Fear of failure. And hold. And the next one along, funnily enough, is fear of success. So you can imagine if this one shows up as well, the poor old brain's between a rock and a hard place. hold, because you can imagine, what does success mean? Success can be fantastic. Success can be the sort of thing that allows us to live our true potential, but it can also be the thing, the whole tall poppy syndrome is so huge in Australia. So it can be that sort of thing where when you're good at something that people want to bring you down, tear you down. It can be that nothing you ever did was good enough as a child. It's an old pain and punishment circuit, actually. It's about something you've achieved where for some reason someone wasn't happy that you'd achieved that thing. Or that fear, maybe you saw that in your parents, so that gave you a fear of success because you saw your mother or your father was successful, and instead of it being a positive experience, it was negative for some reason. Fear of success. And hold. Beautiful. Now with the hippocampus as well, there's some specific parts where I can check short-term memory and long-term memory. So this one's short-term memory. Hold. Beautiful. Actually, there's 2 coordinates with each one, so they're both good. Then I'm going to long-term memory. And hold. Yeah, a little bit waffly. We might diffuse that one. So the way memory works is that you need an emotional reason to remember something. So you can imagine kids who forget to make their bed, and they forget to tidy their room, and they forget to wipe down the bathroom after a shower. What do they get out of it? Part of the brain's going, meh, why would I bother remembering that? Because they don't get any pleasure or reward out of it. As adults, we actually get to choose what we remember to a certain extent, because if we forget to bring home the bread and milk coming home, for example, and we might have kids in a hubby yelling at us that night. So therefore it's in our best interest to remember the bread and the milk. This is interesting. So this is, it's long-term memory being impeded by a lack of pleasure and reward about something. So when Sanu's brain goes, I'm not getting anything out of that. And once again, it wasn't a bad unlock. It was just a little bit of an unlock. But it's the pleasure reward centers being switched off that's showing up in the amygdala. And hold. Beautiful. And hold. Yeah, right. And say that one's long-term memory in relation to an old pain and punishment circuit as well. Which is interesting because the short-term memory was working really well, but it's once we get into long-term memory. And it's like creating a habit. You know, so it's when you've done it, you know, that whole thing, what you do every day for 21 days you have for life. But if your brain's going, meh, why would I bother but laying it down, then it doesn't bother laying down that long-term memory. And hold. Beautiful. Now I also want to quickly check a couple of integrating areas that integrate information, because these are really important for exams and students and people who are trying to put together information from the world around them. And hold. Perfect. These areas are brokers to brokers. They are the words that come out of our mouth. So one side is to do with the actual words and the other side is to do with the tone behind the words. But those ones are working well. And hold. Oh, those ones are Wernicke's points. So just behind the brokers areas are the Wernicke's. Wernicke's are the thoughts behind the words. So when they're unlocking, the thoughts can be logical, the thoughts can be emotional. And when they're unlocking, it means there's a lack of connect between the logical and emotional things. And when we're having a day, sometimes we're saying emotional stuff before we're thinking, or we are trying to be logical to avoid the emotional gear. So the brain disconnects it to protect ourselves. It's usually about protection. And hold. Beautiful. And the next one are the auditory integration points. Okay. Now, this one is a really busy area because It's everything you're hearing from the world around you, as well as everything you're thinking. And then it's about how you comprehend that so that it becomes the thoughts in the Wernicke's and then becomes the words that come out of your mouth in the Broca's. So it's a busy little area. And this is how we come up with opinions, and it's how we work out who we are in the world around us because of our thoughts. But some people, when there's a real lack of disconnect with these areas, sometimes they can only ever repeat what other people have said. And you probably recognize that with people where they might say something, but then they don't have a thought or an opinion behind that. So you think, oh really, why do you think that? And they can't come up with a reason, which is often one of those, and I'm not saying you do this, but it can be one of those things where basically that's when the brain goes, I've got nothing to back that up. I've got nothing else to think there. And hold. Beautiful. So that is just a little bit of the LEAP program. So it's the corpus callosum that connects the left and right sides of the brain, the anterior commissure, which feeds that frontal cortex where we problem solve, the hippocampus, which is our major memory center. And actually there's a whole section on the hippocampus itself. And then those integrative points, the Broca's areas, Wernicke's areas, auditory integration point, and rip and lip, which integrates everything your brain is seeing and hearing, ingoing and outgoing memories, putting them all together so that we feel comfortable in the world around us. Hope that's useful.